Well, welcome. I want to know how many in here are parents. I mean, and you don't have to be a parent of a child with special needs, you know, of looking at that. And professional, because usually I ask, and when I get asked to go and speak, or because I not only am in the profession, but have 4 children, 2 whom happen to have disabilities. Our oldest son has multiple disabilities, and so we spent a lot of time with medical people, professional people with him growing up. Our second son had mild disabilities. I say our daughter, I called her the social butterfly. She was in school, but yet she wasn't. You know, she either liked you or she hated you. And then our youngest son was on the very end, very gifted. And in some states, gifted was under the umbrella of special ed. So with 3 kids under the special ed umbrella, we attended a lot of IEP meetings, you know, of looking at that, and hopefully learned some strategies throughout the years. And usually when I go, they say, now which hat are you wearing? Are you a professional this week, or are you a parent? And so I know a lot of people in the field, I call them, at least I call myself dual diagnosed, that professional, you know, and which hat are you wearing and what are you looking at today? But I want to talk about some strategies, because I will tell you, as I told the group, the last group this morning, I keep data of why people are exiting special education, particularly teachers. I do exit interviews. And it used to be that it was salary and paperwork. I will tell you, 2 years ago, it turned. The reason many teachers and many professionals are leaving our field is because they don't want to sit across the table from nasty advocates or crabby parents. And that's sad. So we need to figure out how can we turn this around, you know, and what does that look like, you know, of doing that. And so this, I guess, hour now, we're going to pretty much talk about parent-professional partners. And I say we need to walk in each other's shoes, because sometimes we don't look at that. And usually when we do parent training, there's a little booklet called Walk in Each Other's Shoes. Turn it on one side, it's one perspective. You turn it on the other side, it's another perspective, you know, of looking at that. Because I usually get calls from teachers, I mean the parent, well, we want the IEP meeting on Friday night, or we want it at 6 in the morning, or this or that, and doing that. And I always tell parents, wait a minute, if you're going to walk in each other's shoes, we need to be in respect and really look at the valuable time of staff. Because I will tell you, if you really look at it, because many schools that I work in, they have their IEP meetings before or after school, many times after school. And I'll even share with the parent groups our data. Because believe it or not, teachers and professionals' kids are the biggest group of latchkey kids in the country, because we're not home. And they're no different than you, wanting to get home, getting dinner, and getting everything else when the school day is over. So we really need to look at how we do that, because we do our IEPs during the school day. In other words, again, as I talked earlier this morning with teachers, our teachers do so many IEPs each month, because our teachers only have 15 students that they have to do IEPs for. Because we absolutely spread them out, because we had some teachers doing 40, some 10, some 8. Everybody does the K6, K8 does 15 for the year, and our middle schools and high schools do 20. And so if you divide those out, it's 2 or 3 a month. And we have what we call stack days. Well, we'll get substitutes to bring the gen ed teacher and the special ed teachers in, because the worst thing is I'm at these IEP meetings and my kids aren't getting instructed. And that's sad, because if we really look at student achievement, we need to be instructing rather than in meetings, you know, of doing that. And we have stack days. Usually it's 1 or 2, because each teacher usually is doing 2, you know, a month. And if we have 5 teachers, you know, in a building, because that's our lowest number, you know, at the elementary, then that's usually 10 to 14 IEPs per month for all of those teachers. I mean, 2 to 3 apiece. And so we do stack days, and we plan 2 days a month, and they're all done. because we really want you to focus on writing those. And so we are like a doctor's office. We send out appointments that year in advance to parents saying your IEP is going to be this month during this week. I mean, we'll have to work on times, so parents know ahead of time. It's no different than going to the dentist or the doctor, whatever. We make it very professional, of doing that, than try to by guess and by golly in doing that. And we need to understand how each other thinks. So I'm going to talk a bit today about the emotions that I've done a survey nationwide when I was National ARC President several years ago now. I did a whole study interviewing parents of their emotions, because I'm always, like when we had our children with disabilities, are you going through the grieving cycle? Where are you in this? And whatever. But I think there's other emotions, and with parents I call it the roller coaster effect. Some years are good, some years are low, and sometimes parents, when we are in that mood, we take it out on the professionals, because you're the closest thing that we have, of looking at that. And then what do we do when we get into conflict, and how do we resolve that? I wish one of the classes that teachers had to take, and we do train all of our teachers when they're new, particularly their first year, our mentor teachers, in conflict resolution, because many times we're finding we don't get that in our higher ed studies. Because people come to the meeting, my God, they cried or they started yelling. What am I supposed to do? How do I redirect? How do I, just like with kids' behavior, in doing that? And so we spend a lot of time talking about conflict resolution. What can we do to support each other? What can we learn from each other? And we'll talk about that. And do both the professional and parent know the chain of command? Because many times we have people jumping over other people. For example, in my district as the director, I have 4,000 students identified. I tell the parents, so the minute I walk in, no matter when, this is several districts I've worked in, I will not be at your IEP meeting. I refuse to attend, because I don't want the IEP team to think you brought the big dog in, because I take the credibility away from that IEP team. You need to be communicating and keeping it at that level. I'll meet with you before you go to your IEP. I'll meet with the school team before they go to the IEP, but I won't play this game that you get the director or some administrator higher up, because to me it keeps the communication happening. Like I've got one leg up, in doing that. So we're very upfront and very honest about that, because like I tell parents, if I come for 3 or 4 out of 4, why should you get all my services because you advocate the loudest, and the ones that maybe don't know how, they get nothing? It's not fair. That's the parent in me. It's just not right. So you just need to know that right up front, going along. Now, I'll teach you the chain of command, of doing that. Do I send other people, like into the district office, like coordinators and stuff? Yes. But again, I don't like the power trip thing, of who can get who at the IEP meeting, because to me it breaks down the communication, of looking at that. The emotions, here's what I found is the top emotions that parents bring to meeting. And we need to train our teachers. We need to train our administrators. We need to be training people why parents act or react at the meeting and why they do that. Because I say we bring a lot of baggage, to the meeting, because there are a lot of things that affect our lives, when you have a son or daughter with disability. And we need to be very upfront about that. So we can sit down and have really good conversations. The first one I call disillusionment, because many families, those that have children, when your wife or you were pregnant for that 9 months, you're dreaming about what your children are going to be like. You can say you don't, but we do. Like our first one, Chris, I knew it was going to be a boy, but he was going to be a baseball player. I had everything lined out for him for his life before he even came out of the womb. Of looking at that. And then when he came out and there's all these issues, it's like, oh my God, my world shattered there for a bit. It isn't what I expected. It isn't what I truly thought it was going to be like, of looking at that. So that really holds with parents for a long time. And some parents go through the processes differently. Not everybody is the same. Just like a kid in a classroom. Not everybody's unique of how they react to things, in doing that. And so I would be asking parents, what are your emotions? What are your feelings before you come to a meeting? Are you okay? We never ask that. We just kind of come, and nobody likes to come to the meetings anyway. In doing that. I'll never forget when my kids, because they're all old now, when we were even with Chris going through graduation. I mean, he graduated clear early, because he was born before the mandate, before we had special ed. So we didn't even deal with those issues, but I'll never forget when we started the transition process, and even the diploma. I finally said, Chris could care less about the diploma. I want that diploma because how many hundreds of IEPs did I attend, and survived? I'm hanging it on my wall. It's all about me, kind of thing, and looking at that. Let's just be honest, of going through that. So I will tell you, parents bring the disillusionment to the table, particularly if they're in early childhood and preschool, and it's really scary when you leave early childhood services and go into school, of looking at that. Because we do a lot of training because a lot of parents of early childhood truly have been kind of brainwashed or doctrinated about the medical model, and then when you get into school, you're moving into more of an educational model. It's different. Truly looking at that, and do they understand that? Or moving from an IFSP, family involvement, to truly just an individual education plan. They're different, but do we have those conversations, of looking at that? So a lot of times, many parents are still disillusioned, of looking at that. The second one is aloneness. And that's scary for parents. Particularly in our case, when we had children with disabilities, all of our friends, they didn't know what to say. And it's not that they still didn't care or they weren't friends, but it's like, it's awkward. And you feel alone at times because they don't come around as much because it is awkward. Let's just face, even our parents. My parents disowned us because we were never to have a child with a disability. They didn't talk to us for 2 or 3 years, of looking at that. That weighs on a person, even within the family structure, because it's hard for people. They're dealing it with their own emotions, family, the bigger circle of the family, and looking at those things. And it's tough on families. We need to think about those things when they come to the table. Of truly looking at that, because that was one of the top when I talked with families, is they just felt alone. Even though they're dealing, depending on level of ability, that gets to the third one, the vulnerability. It's like when you have a child that may even have medical issues, it's like you have no control over your life. You're going to medical people, you're going to specialists, you're going to educators, you're going to, do I get any control? It's like everybody else, all these experts, are telling us we need to do this, and you need to do this, and you need to do this. It's like the control out of my life is gone. It's just like when kids with behavior, let's give them choices at times. So they have some control of their life. Families are no different. Or at least they feel that way, at least in all my discussions with them, of looking at that. They feel very vulnerable, of looking at that. I'll never forget when Chris was young. Again, he was born before Public 94-142, because he was born in 72, and looking at that, we didn't have a law till 75. And it was interesting because when we started getting the services, the speech therapist, I want these worksheets done at night and whatever. Well, I will tell you, with 4 children, it's survival to do the 3 B's, the bed, fed, and bathed. At night. Do you think I'm going to spend 20 to 30 minutes doing speech? I lied through my teeth. Parents are really good at learning to lie then and playing the system, because we knew there were expectations. They were going to give us heck, or Chris was, if they weren't done. But do you know what it's like having 4 kids, getting homework done, and then, the dinner, bathing, bed, all that, it's hard. Of looking at that. So we almost teach parents to lie, because they don't want to let somebody down. And it's still that vulnerability and looking at that. The next one that I heard from parents throughout the country was inequity. Not feeling equal. And I tried to put my arms around that, of looking at that. And I guess the one example that I can give being a parent, Because you want to fit in. I mean, that's why parents truly want inclusive practices, more than ever, because they want to fit. It's community. And it isn't if your kids are segregated and going somewhere else. Even to school. I can't even go down the street. But I'll never forget the first feeling of inequity. I remember when Chris was starting school, and he very included, we had him on a t-ball team. And I remember every night, at night, going out and teaching Chris to hit the ball off the tee, because he had lots of motor things, because if you push Chris, he'd just fall. He couldn't catch himself. So we were not only working on that, but we were teaching how to do a t-ball, of doing that. And so he was on a typical t-ball team. We thought, this is great, because we want to be part of the community, because you meet lots of friends through your kids. And if they're different, it's difficult. In doing that and looking at that. And so I'll never forget, we got to the t-ball game, the first t-ball game. And I mean, Chris got up there and he whacked it. I mean, I really taught him well. The only thing that I forgot is to teach him to run the bases, because we worked so hard on hitting. So he turns around, Papa, Mama, and everybody's sitting in the stands, run, run, and you heard a comment down the way, oh, that's that retarded kid. And here you were feeling in the stands like you were equal, we had worked on this, and then one comment can just devastate. That's what parents come to meetings with. That background and whatever. And so we need to be very careful, as we go through that, because you want to be equal, but that there's differences, and that's why we need to be very accepting of differences, as we go through that process, of looking at that. So one of the big things that most parents talk about is the inequity. And wanting to get equal, with everybody else. And then there's that insignificance. And that kind of goes along with that inequity. That, my kids aren't significant. They want them off, they want them gone, they want them doing something else. And I get, especially when I get a new job and we go to a new district, many of the people don't realize that I'm a parent. And I'll walk in and it's like, boy, that kid didn't fall far from the tree, did they? We're looking at all of those things, and I finally say, you need to watch your comments, because I'm a parent and I take that rather harshly, as we go through that, because it's like there's some, and again, when I do surveys with teachers across the country, and I will tell you, when kids have a certain label, the expectations are different with certain labels. Let's just face it. I mean, if people are very honest, about achievement, about expectations or anything, of looking at that, and that's where that insignificance comes into. Because I know with Chris, when he was young, talk about teaching parents to really lie. We had depending on where you live, is it the Vineland, the Vinland, you go and look at what the self-help skills, and, taking that. I had Chris doing everything. Because if I know I lied and they thought he was much higher, he'd have a different placement. Let's just say it like it is. So we learned to play the game well. I have many parents now that say, I don't even want the IQ test. Because again, the expectations of a certain IQ, of doing that. So you're going to hear parents, why do we have to have an IQ test? This kid has Down syndrome. What's an IQ test going to tell you what he can do on Monday? We have all of those discussions and things going on, in looking at that. And then past orientation, a lot of times we want parents to think ahead. We're going to be transitioning, we're going to be looking at this. I will tell you, many parents live day to day. I can't think ahead. That will depend on level of ability. Like if you've got a kid that's got medical issues, severe, profound, it's just, I'm surviving today. I can't think about, 5 years down the road or whatever. I am barely making it today to get everything done. So we need to, have those kinds of conversations, because, I have teachers all the time. They're just not thinking down the road, or they'll say the parents get to senior year. We've talked about transition for it's like it just didn't happen overnight. What's wrong with them? They don't want to face it. And let's be honest, I can't think about, getting down that road and what does that look like. So we may have to bring those conversations up. And then the loss of immortality. In other words, many families, because of the gene pool and all that, if I have a son or daughter, who's going to carry on the family name? Lots of family issues going on, within. Did it come from your side, your side? I mean, we had, the genetic workups. I mean, they're dealing with lots of issues that you never think about them bringing to that IEP table. I mean, their minds are full of that stuff. And then I come to the table and we got to write these goals. You're talking Greek language that I don't even understand, because we talk in alphabet soup in special ed, with all our acronyms, and most people don't have any clue what we're talking about. So I would suggest, if you're not doing training for new families, I would really look at training families before they come to that IEP. We have a parent liaison that we contract with, and I only contract with her because I don't want parents to think we're hired and she's under our thumb. We contract. She's her own individual. She does all of our parent training. If you go to our website, she does all of our website for student support services. I mean, that's what she does, because we don't have time to do it. And I want her to make sure it's family to family, even on our website and all the training. But we have what we call IEP partners. And we train parents, seasoned parents that have been in special ed a while. We train them. If we've got a new family that's on the initial eval, we set something up with them, and we have that parent go and talk about acronyms, special ed process. We call it the yellow brick road. How do you get to the wizard? We're following this path. You go through the teacher, and then the principal, the intervention specialist, so they know that path of communication. Because we literally, with our parents, we tell them, because we have parents that will almost like, let's play mom against dad and this and that. I mean, we learn our tricks. We want parents to have one point of contact. So the communication's always with one person rather than going through several. So it's good communication back and forth. So we're not playing people. So with the school building, here is your point of contact. This is who you communicate through to get to everybody else. It's not to say you can't talk to them, but they'll be your conduit. Just so we keep that line of communication really clear and really open, because it really alleviates a lot of miscommunication with different people saying different things, of going through that and looking at that. So I would say, and then their role is not as an advocate, and we state that up front. Because I do believe in advocacy, but advocates have a negative connotation. We call them support persons. We want each parent to have a support person. Because I always had one growing up. And I learned this, just to give background. With Chris, when he was 7, we moved because I went to work on my doctorate, and in Manhattan, Kansas. Here I'd student taught. I had done everything. I was the IEP coordinator for the state that I had worked with teachers. We got into the school system there, and we couldn't agree on anything. We finally had, I think, 36 people at our IEP meeting when we finished. We filed for due process. It was unheard of because I taught at the middle school, working for the school district and taking the school district to due process. This was even before there were attorney fees written into the law. That's how old and long ago it was, in looking at that. And I'll never forget, because I didn't have any idea that you could have a due process hearing open or closed. Didn't have a clue what we were even doing, and it didn't matter to me. And so the first thing on the newspaper, and I could show you, Remus takes USD 383 on carpet. I thought, oh my God, the front page. By the time we were done, we had 100 letters to the editor. They even did political cartoon. I should have brought that. Of Chris in a rowboat with me arguing with the superintendent. And at that day and age, it had mainstreaming on the back of the boat. And they made Chris look just like Chris in this caricature. It was uncanny to me, of looking at that, with us arguing on the side about mainstreaming, because we couldn't agree. On anything, of looking at that. Big due process. Finally, I never took it to work, but that's why I said then and there, I will do anything to get parent-professional partnership to work together. Because I will tell you, halfway through the due process, because it was months, even over a year, then you wonder, are we even talking about the same issue that we started with? Of looking at that. But I had to go halfway through and say, am I now doing this for Chris, or am I doing this because I hate him so bad? I mean, you really have to be honest, of looking at this. Am I out to get him, or am I truly figuring out what we need to do for Chris? When we looked at this, it cost us $7,000 then. It cost the district $100 and some thousand just because we couldn't get a loan that could have gone to materials, it could have gone to kids, and then vowing that we need to get something in place to start working together. And what does that look like as we go through that, of doing that. Parents mishandling professionals. To me, there's two sides to a coin, because when a parent calls me and says, I said, I've got your information. I will just tell you up front, I need to go talk to the school or the teacher that you're complaining about or whatever, because I used to say it up front. There's always two sides to a story. And before we make any judgments here, I want to collect the data, because I want to take the emotion out of it, of looking at that. Because what parents will do, they shop around. We have parents now shopping around because they want to find somebody, if their kid has an intellectual disability or even a learning disability, the main thing now to have is they'll try to find somebody, I want my kid to have autism. It used to be years ago when Chris was young, you didn't want intellectual disability, we wanted Chris to have a learning disability because of placement issues. Of looking at what happened. So parents, I don't know how many. I know that Julie talked a couple minutes this morning about the IEs. We have lots of families. I don't like your eval, I'm going to get one. It costs our district a lot each year because it's cheaper than going to due process to try to get that second opinion that we have to consider. But I will tell you, parents will shop around. And we need to, hopefully, if we've got communication, why are you doing this? When the parent asks for an IE, why? I want it in writing, and don't just tell me you don't agree with the eval. In what area? What's truly behind this? Do you truly not think this is it? Do you think you're going to find something else? It's like she said this morning, it doesn't matter what the label is. We're going to write that IEP to fit needs. I talked with one parent one year because she wanted a different label, and they had changed it, from DD to an intellectual disability. This mother was in tears. And I said, Mary, is Susan any different from last week to this week? Does she have the same smile? Does she do the same things? What is wrong here? Just because they gave it, we still have to meet needs. She's no different. Yes, they classified differently, but now how can we work through this, of looking at this? Because the kid's no different. We're just trying to find what's the best strategy or pattern or whatever to make sure your child is successful, of doing that. Those little things trigger, of looking at that. Unfair expectations. Parents coming in and totally unfair of what they think their child's going to do. We have even students when we start into transition. I'm going to be a doctor. Well, you have a moderate intellectual disability. This just may not happen. I wouldn't want you operating on me. Let's look at all the other fields in the hospital. Let's look at all the other things that we can look at, because if that's what you're looking at, I don't want to burst the bubble, but let's be realistic, and what does that look like? No different with parents. I was that parent. I was awful. It took me years because they, in doing that, because they had all these initials, that I didn't, because I thought they were talking about, when they talked about DH, I kept thinking, oh, developmentally handicapped. No, it was their code, Dad from Hell. And I find, oh, is that what that meant? Kind of thing, and looking at that, because I'll never forget Chris, kids have to learn to read. If they're going to do anything in their life, they have to read. Well, Chris never really learned to get past second grade reading ability level, because of his disability. But by George, I was unfair, because why aren't you getting reading? Why can't they read? What have you tried? What methodologies? All of that we need to talk through. So, parents will come in with unfair expectations. I've pretty much talked about why we're dishonest. Because we're literally taught to be dishonest, of looking at that. But parents will, because they know it'll make a difference in what services a kid will get, where, that whole placement issue. So we will be dishonest at times in looking at that. Many parents unwilling to I'm the parent, I know better, You'd only have them for a few hours a day, but you have them at least 6. We need to work through this. Parents are not the best advocates. That's why I always took a support person with me to all of my IEP meetings, because they would say something and I'd kind of check out, of looking at that. But we've got to sit down. Why are you so unwilling to know what we're doing? Why only your way is the best? And we'll talk about that, because sometimes parents do know, and we need to give them credit. I was advocating for a family when we lived in Nashville. And this young gal with Down syndrome happened to be living with grandmother. And I went in because Chloe wouldn't stay in her seat more than 5 minutes. And the grandmother saying, well, she can sit for an hour and a half at home and work. Oh, you're just saying that, With this day and age with lip crammers, tape it. We don't believe each other, and vice versa, of looking at that. Because I went home and I said, well, let's just go see, how she sits. And when she was at home at Grandma's, all she had to do was have a little green beanie frog on the corner of the desk, and she'd work forever. If it's all this turmoil before we get to do, I'll buy you 20 little frogs at school, if that's the case. We got to communicate, of looking at that, and sometimes it's that unwillingness to listen, as we go around and looking at that, and then with that, unreasonable demands. I have parents coming in, I want 26 IEP goals. Why? Because you don't trust us. You need to have 3 to 4 max. Because if we're going to do a good job of progress monitoring, if we're truly going to collect data, we can only do it on some focus, not 28, 30, whatever, because you just don't, well, if it's not written in there, it won't happen. It ain't going to happen when you walk out that door anyway. Let's just be realistic. Nobody in their right mind can do all this, of looking at that. We might as well have that conversation again up front, because we do want the kid to gain, we want us to meet the goals, but then let's be realistic about them, with the demands or whatever, and what does that look like in doing that. And then professionals mishandling parents. Many times we just ignore. If we ignore long enough, they'll go away. Principals and other ones at times drive me crazy. Because a parent will call. If a parent's calling, they have something they need to know now. I have a goal in our office. You have to get back with the parents within 24 hours. Because otherwise they just stew and get angrier. Why make it worse? Of looking at that. We should not be ignored. And if I'm gone, like here, Thursday, Friday, if Michael's gone for 2 days, you cannot wait. He will call you when he gets back on Monday. Just so they know that we've listened to them and that somebody will be getting back, or can somebody else help you? Of looking at that. Hopelessness. That's where I've done the surveys with teachers. There are certain kids, there's no hope for these kids, or at least that's the belief system. We need to have high expectations for every kid. I don't care if they're trapped in a body. I've seen some of the brightest geniuses trapped in a body that could not communicate until we found a way. So we don't know how smart an individual is until we've tapped every resource that we can look at. Referral infinitum. Oh, you need to call over here. And then you need to, because we think after they've called 5 different people, they'll just give up. We need to, whoever that point of contact, that's why I really want that point of contact. Let me get you the information and I'll get back with you. Because parents will give up after 2 or 3 calls, and then they're mad. And they'll come to the meeting mad because I didn't get my question answered. And all it would have taken is a few simple moments. It'll change the entire IEP, when they come to that table, of looking at that. Deaf ear syndrome. I've known many professionals. I am the professional and you are the parent. I know what's best for your child. We get that. That almost comes with that professional omniscience. That's like when we write our reports, but particularly under professional omniscience. I meet with our psychs, I meet with our speech. Write your reports, and we're now into thematic evaluations, truly looking at what needs to help this kid, rather than just an IQ. Because, you'll have a psychologist, urethicist. Why don't you just say wet the bed at night? let's just state it. I know you're smart. You have a PhD, but not everybody around that table, if it's a grandma and an aunt or an uncle or whatever, let's just say it. We have made reports so long, and especially when I go, the next session we'll talk about IEPs, but we spend most of the time looking at the results and very little time doing the IEP if you combine the meetings. Parents, if it's, their 4th, 5th, 6th grade on up, they know what their child can and can't do. Why are we spending so much time on this? I want to talk about what motivates. I want to talk about how we're going to reach this goal. What does it look like on Monday? And looking at that and going through. But we need to get rid of that deaf ear syndrome, and then treating parents as patients. We have an attitude that if the kid has a disc, something's wrong with the parent. Doesn't fall far from the tree. Particularly kids with autism. My God, the parent's on the spectrum too. Yeah, no. We got to be very, very careful. Things slip out. People say things. Very hurtful. If people hear or whatever, in looking at that. Before the IEP meeting, let's talk some tactics here. Ask what other members of the IEP team will be recommending for this student. And do you share a draft IEP? We send a draft at least a week or two home, and I have crafted a letter because our IEPs will not last any more than an hour. Because if you start getting them longer, people get angry. People forget, they say things they shouldn't say. They shouldn't be. If you really do your communication up front, most of our IEPs meetings can be done in 45 minutes if we've done a good job communicating. But why can't that parent have that draft? I will never forget Chris one time. We were in Norfolk, Nebraska. Forget what grade Chris was in. They came in with the IEP. It was big. They'd all seen it. And why don't you read through this? So they all sat there silent. I don't know if they were testing my reading skills, or what they were doing, but you talk about embarrassing and feeling like you're put on the spot, of looking at that. But why can't they have the draft? Because we have the letter I've got saying, and this is why we're doing it, because we're only meeting this long up front. We're going to be very honest. If we need to call another meeting if it goes longer and we can't get everything done, but we have a timekeeper. That we spend so much time here, and we spend very little time on the current level of performance. Yeah, we're going to look at some data, but let's get to the true objective. We're writing goals. What are we going to do this year to be able to accomplish? Because we spend so much time. And I've seen some IEPs and systems, they do parent concerns first. Why would you not have that at the very end of the process? Then right away, we never get off the concerns. And our goal is we need to do what we're going to do for this kid, in looking at that. Because some states, it's different. Because some states, the parents have to sign that they agree to the IEP, which that's not law, but they go above and beyond. When I was in Tennessee, they had to sign on that they agreed. The state I'm in now, it's not. But I always wrote in the end of the IEP then, if we found, resolution and agreement on 80%, and there's just only one goal, I agree with this, except because if you don't, the kid's going to wait how many more weeks to get services? Isn't the goal to help the kid rather than the adult issues that are at the table, of looking at that? So we need to know the student's current strengths and needs. If there's disagreement about goals, try to resolve it before the meeting. That's the beauty of a draft. Then nobody comes to the table surprised. I don't agree with. Our goal was I wanted toileting done. Yours is math. Now how are we going to negotiate this? Because it is about academics. Yes, we will get a schedule. We'll kind of get it toilet trained, but we need to do those conversations. Why wait and get everybody at the table? Because you got a lot of money sitting at that table if you're going to wait and do all the disagreements there. We wait. Kids need to be with their teachers. They need to be with their therapists. That's why when a family calls and wants an IEP every week, let's talk turkey here. If I was the other parents in your class and you're taking all the time and they're not getting educated, I'm going to come down on you. Let's just say it like it is. You just need to meet with me, because unless it changes something drastic in that IEP, we're just meeting to meeting because we can't get along. In all honesty. of doing that. Now, most directors and other people don't want to take that on, but that should be part of our role, as a coordinator or whatever, in looking at that. What's working for the student and what is not. That's why the communication is so important. And if there is disagreement, videotape. Oh, my kid would never act like that at school. Let me show you. I've got kids that are like Jekyll and Hyde. I had a son with mild disability, totally different at home than at school. He could wrap anybody around his finger to get out of work at school and at home. I mean, it was unbelievable, of looking at that and going through. Know what kinds of accommodations or adaptations are needed. Make a list of what you want to discuss at the meeting. And we always send the letter, we send a draft IEP, and I always send the agenda. Because the team, that's all we're doing. Now, if you've got other issues, we'll put it on the parking lot and we'll have a separate meeting. If you're mad at the principal or if you're mad at this or whatever, this is not the forum to do it. Our goal here is to do an IEP meeting. And that's all we're going to do. Otherwise, we'll stop it. If we have an advocate that's getting up in arms, we stop the meeting. We're not having our people abused. We're not doing name calling or what. I'm so honest. I have 2 advocates that we banned from being on our campuses. You can participate by phone, but you're not going to be on our campus. It just didn't happen. Because you don't make the IEP. All you want is your dollars and cents, and you want to drag them out financially so you can get money from parents. I mean, again, those crucial conversations, of looking at that. So if they have it, I mean, to me, we can do more good before the IEP meeting than any other point in the process. If we can do good communication, that everybody knows what we're doing at that table, we're very focused, we're looking at what this kid is going to do for this coming year. Here's the baseline. You want that data. So, if you're going to count by 100, and you already know, we've got the baseline, and they already know, 15 of the alphabet, where are we going to be at the end of the year? It needs to be specific. Not gets along well with others or whatever. What is your data? And communicate. I can't say that enough, as we go through in looking at that. And then during the meeting, work to create an atmosphere of a team working together. I literally train our teachers how to set up the room. Because if you got everybody on this side of the table and the parents walk in, you don't have to say a word. It already looks divided. I'd have a round table. Rather than just one side versus the other side, of looking at that. If you're already meeting to get your ducks in a row, make sure you do it early enough that you're not all sitting there when the parents walk in. Because their first thought is going to be, oh, they've been meeting and talking about us and we weren't invited. When you walk into that room. Of looking at that. So I do my ducks in a row the week before or 2 days before. I wouldn't do I call them DIR meetings, ducks in a row meeting, because I think the educators do need to get our ducks in a row of how we're going to present ourselves. Because I've got staff that don't agree at times, and we don't need to be doing that in front of the parent because it looks like we don't have our act together. Of looking at that. And so I can't say enough about DIR meetings, the ducks in a row, of looking at that and doing that. And then review and follow the agenda. Why have one? People get off because I'll have a timekeeper saying, we've only got 5 minutes for this. Are we going to extend this and cut something else because we have to be out of here in 45 minutes or 20 minutes or whatever. It makes it very professional. People think, well, that's going to make a mess. Parents are no different than us about wanting to keep to a schedule. They've got things to do, of looking at that. If we can keep everything on track, they're appreciative. Of looking at that. At first the parents, the advocates are the ones that are mad because they want to drag them out. Well, by God, by law, you can't do this. Yes, we can. We just didn't finish. We're going to do a next meeting. If you want to get your money, come back the next time then. Kind of thing. Let's just, of doing that. Because we have advocates that take advantage of parents. Truly, and that's why we want to even train our own parent advocates, that IEP partner, because like I said, they go to that first IEP meeting with them, not to talk for them, but they work with them up front, then they come to the meeting, and then after the meeting they'll debrief, and that's usually the end of their like workload or whatever in doing that. And then they'll be friends. We want to at least connect them with another parent. We try to do it within the same building, but it may be another building in the district if we don't have enough IEP partners. But our goal is we want them comfortable because it's new and it's scary for parents. And why would we want to set them up to fail, of doing that? Discuss what and how other students will be told about the student's disability. If you go to our web, we've developed a whole disability awareness packet that we talked about at the last session when we did the teacher thing. I mean, we literally go in and we train other kids about disabilities if they're in their class. They need to know. Particularly if you've got a student with behavior needs, we got to keep the other kids safe, and here's how we're going to do it. Let's just be right up front, of doing that. And then look for ways to make goals a natural part of the day. And we're going to talk about that at the next session. We're going to really talk about how do we write specific goals. What should they look like? What are you going to do on Monday? Because we write all these things and everybody comes to Monday and it's like, what? I didn't know I had to do this today. And I didn't know I was collecting data on this. We need to be very, very cognizant. And again, communicate. And then look for ways to blend goals together. Usually when I do IEP training, I can take 6 IEP goals and I can blend them into one activity, and I can have my data and I can have all my stuff done in 10 minutes. We've made special ed so special, it's hard. Because the one example that I give is you got a kid that needs directions, spatiality, getting from point A to point B. Say they're learning in fine motor, they need to know numbers or counting. They need a communication goal. They need, whatever. And I'll have that kid go down to learn direction and whatever to get to the office. They will go and they will use their fine motor. They will get on the phone. They'll know their numbers, their home phone. They will call, and most homes now have like voice machines. And I want you to use 6-word sentences because I got my data right on the tape to bring into school. I mean, I can collect my data and I can have 6 goals done in a 10-minute activity and have all my data to report. Because we teach everything for some reason in special ed in isolation. We need to make sure those goals are blended in, and we'll talk about that in the next session, of looking at that. And then make sure that everything is clear. When you're going through that meeting, it's no different than being a classroom teacher where you stop every now and then to check for understanding. When you're doing something, I just heard, because I will sit there and watch. I go and watch because we train our teachers. Have you done any training in body language? What to look for? I mean, we don't do enough with that conflict resolution kinds of things because you can tell. I mean, I can see when somebody's eyes are glazed over when I have a speech therapist. Now, this phonemic process going on with it, and you can say, what's a phonemic process? Again, we need to really check for understanding, because I see many times people, not only the parent, but other people, the gen ed teacher, whomever, the eyes glaze over when we start going through these processes. And as if you're a gen ed teacher, I'd be asking, what does this mean? Because usually if I'm facilitating an IEP meeting, I'll go around at the end of the meeting and say, what are you doing on Monday? What's your role going to be? What are you doing on Monday? Because if people don't know, we just leave and then nothing. Well, I thought you were doing that. It's no different than going to like a church, or some other committee meeting, and you go in and then you leave. Was I supposed to do something? What am I doing? We need to be that specific, in that communication and looking at that. And then at the end of the meeting, decide who will do what and the deadlines. Nothing loses more credibility than if you say you're going to do things and then nobody ever follows up. I'm supposed to check this out and get back to you. Or I'm supposed to check this, make sure that what we do, that we do it. And really report back. I mean, set time frames. Now, do you take minutes of your IEP meetings? Because some people do, because by law you don't need to. I like it because it holds us accountable, and if you get into due process, you know what was said or not. Where's the issue here? Of looking at that. Because we have a lot of districts around us that don't, and I always get creamed. Well, your district just overachieves because you don't have to take minutes. And the other ones, let's go to this district, it's less work. Kind of thing in looking at that. The what? Well, I think so too, but you don't have to have minutes, because your prior written notice is supposed to, what you proposed, they'll just say, you got your prior written notice, that's what took place at this meeting. I like minutes, I like notes, of doing that. But there's many districts that are going away from that, just so you know, because by law you don't have to. Of looking at that. But I think it's a good communication. And the reason but again, they need to just train and have the conversation differently, because they'll ask everybody at the end of the meeting, they'll read through the notes, and the advocates, I don't like that, I want this in there. Or it's not your notes. It's the school notes. We just need to get our big boy, and girl pants on and just stand up and say, there are notes. If you take notes, if you want to take your own. But here's what happened at this meeting. It's not, to go back and forth, agree or disagree on the minutes, of looking at that. Because that's where a lot of people are getting caught up, and that's why they're doing away, with notes and looking at that. And then after the meeting, communication. Have we if there wasn't a team member there, said that they couldn't be there and they took, their notes, we need to know so that everybody knows what they're doing. Even the parents, if they said they were going to do something, to follow up with them. And then we need to continue to check up to make things are going. It's almost like once you do an IEP, it's out of sight, out of mind. Except when the teacher may, or whoever's doing it, the progress monitoring. We need to follow up and make sure that things are working. And especially gen ed teachers, they look at me like a deer in a headlight, because if something's not working in your classroom, why are you not calling an IEP meeting? It's not working. Why are you suffering? Let's get back together and brainstorm this. Let's come up with a different behavior plan or a strategy or whatever the case may be, of looking at that. Because most I didn't know I could call one. You're a member. And it's just like when we set up that environment, I always take a pad of paper and a pen for the parent. Because if somebody has the report, it just physically makes them look like they're part of the team. If they want to doodle or whatever. Just little strategies to make sure that everybody feels like because they are a member of the team. They're not an add-on. They are truly a functioning member. The law tells us that, of doing that. And then how many of you, I always have our staff call after the IEP meeting, and particularly the teacher, to send a thank you. Thank you for coming to the IEP. It was great to see you. Of looking at that. With all of our teachers at the beginning of the school year, when they get their student loads, I tell them the very first 3 weeks, take 3 kids a night for 10 minutes. Call that parent, it's nice to have Johnny in class. It will make your world so different for the entire year. Because the only time sometimes we hear from each other is if something's wrong. I don't care if you even hate them. I've got people that I don't like. I'll send them because I want to, it's like slide a sticky paper. I will figure a way to change their mind to get them on board, of looking at it, because it's always about moving this kid, not about adult issues. And we get caught up. And even when I talk with teachers, when they don't personalize this, they're going through some of these emotions. They brought some baggage. You're not the one that started this, so don't personalize. I have people that just say, oh my God, they don't like me. How do you know? It's just like when we moved to Columbus, Nebraska. Chris with all of his issues. The director of special ed where my kids were going, his name was Mike Gossart. Here's Michael Remus, and I heard from the community, the director, that you don't like him. So I called Mike, and I said, I have heard from 2 or 3 people that you think we don't like you. Why are you personalize this? We may not have agreement at all the time, but you're a pillar of the community. I don't know you. All I know who you are is I've seen you on these committees at church, and I've seen you do this, and I have the utmost respect for you. We may not always agree, but please, let's don't personalize this. This is about moving of what we need for this kid. And yeah, I'm going to challenge, I'm going to ask questions, but it has nothing to do with you. It's about, I want, Chris to achieve. And hopefully I'm doing it in a very dignified and a good way, of looking at this. But so many adults get into the drama and the whole thing of, she said, he said, they don't like me. How do you know that? I mean, truly. I mean, when you see them once a year or twice a year or whatever, I mean, how can you even generality say that? It's just like when like the last session when we, how they can't be in a typical classroom. What's a typical classroom? There isn't one. We kind of went through that. I mean, and looking at that. And then if there are problems, we need to resolve them. Let's put it on the parking lot. I mean, we have a thing that we shine up at every meeting, and we'll type up, parking lot that we need to meet later. Or somebody's going to follow up on this, because it doesn't really go in the IEP, of looking at that and showing that so people visually can see, we heard. We're going to look at this, we're going to put time frames. Because some people are very visual. And I want to see that somebody heard me, of doing that. And then, it's almost like when you go to real estate, location, location, location. To me, in this, it's communicate, communicate, communicate. Truly. And it's like I said to the group yesterday, I mean, of all the IEP meetings that I went to with my kids, I hated them. I mean, my stomach always hurt. I mean, I never did like them for some reason. When we were done, I went out and drank. I became a wine expert. I can blind taste whatever you put in front of me to tell you if it's a Sauvignon, if it's a Pinot, if it's a, a Blanc. I mean, I can tell you whites or reds, because I've had them all, of looking at through all those years with IEPs. I am really good at blind taste. I can tell you a wine, a minute I taste it, of looking at that and going through and doing that and doing. The other thing that I don't know if it's in this packet or the next session's packet, I gave you questions to ask as parents or teachers, because even gen ed teachers, for you to be asking questions of the IEP. And I broke them down into, let me see, because I think we need to, and I would send the questions beforehand rather than waiting for the meeting, if you've got questions, because we might as well communicate up front. Like general questions for IEPs. I mean, that's almost like sentence starters. I mean, parents, are they asking for a draft? I mean, to me, they should. We need to communicate up front. Has there been any new testing? Let's talk about any new data. What data are you bringing? Don't surprise me. Both gen ed, I mean, even teachers, maybe they did an eval and what's new? It's almost getting all those ducks in a row. But I kind of broke them down into sections. There's one that I call general questions. And then the big things that I see at IEPs, is questions if your child's student is receiving therapy. Say you're a gen ed teacher. How often are they going? When are they Because I'd rather have the therapist come into the classroom. Because I've had gen ed teachers saying, my God, I've got this kid going to speech, they're going to OT, they're going to the center, they're going, when do I get them? I mean, I call them the hall kids. How much time are they coming and going? We've wasted probably, if you really look at the time throughout a week, 1 to 2 hours when I call the hall kids, when they could be getting instruction. And you add that up to how many weeks of the school year, how much instruction, because they have a label, are they missing on instructional practices? Of looking at that. I mean, that's why we need to have these, up front, under the therapies. Are they done in a natural part of the day? Why are they not coming in? I mean, I gave the example at the last session in OT, of a teacher following through, and does it make sense, to that student? And we'll talk about that when we get of what are you going to do on Monday, of looking at that. And then, lots of questions about behavior. We don't ask near enough questions, particularly the gen ed teacher. What does that look like? What are you going to do at home? all the questions that we need to be asking regarding behavior of students, because that's where people pull their hair out, of looking at that. Those kids are the hardest. Because you put a kid into my classroom that had multiple disabilities, they were great. Because one, they couldn't get up, couldn't run away, couldn't talk back if they didn't have language. It was more, I can deal with that. It's more of the kids that have behavioral needs, of looking at that, where everybody's grasping and grasping at straws of what to do. And we need to spend more time truly looking at that, as we're developing. Because I see many kids getting referred for behavior. We find out they have a learning disability or something else. We never go back and really talk about the behavior of why the referral was made in the first place. Because we get so caught up in the other, of looking at that and going through. Because to me, if we can get good communication between parents and teachers, everybody's life that year is so much better. And one meeting can make it or break it. That's why I even ask, I've got certain families that I know that are I call them the helicopter parents, or high flyers or high profile. I will have the teachers, we make a list in the summer. I have a summer retreat. And we list every building in the schools who are the high flyers. Because that first week of school, I want those parents called. Welcome back, how are you doing? Because again, I'm hoping to change that tone. When they come in and what's going on. And it doesn't take hours. Just say, I've only got 10 minutes. I'm calling this week. I'm calling all the kids in my class, so I need to get on with this. I can't, if you've got an issue, then let's set a time to talk, of looking at that, because I don't want, teachers wasting all night, on the phone with parents and looking at those things. But you can't believe the difference that it will make and how the year will go. Truly that communication up front. Particularly all that communication prior to that IEP. And giving drafts, being very upfront. But then also having those crucial conversations. Because some parents, I've just told parents when I've gone in, the staff at this school, they're scared to death of you. Is that what you want? I'm just trying to help here. Because I usually go in and mediate. That's when I get the calls, because I'm never invited to the nice ones. It's always the ugly ones. And again, I won't go, but I'll meet with people before and after. Because I'll just call a parent. They are scared to death of you. And that's why they're nervous, they're antsy, they're whatever. How are we going to change that? Because it needs to be very, camaraderie. That we're all working together for this kid. And what does that look like? But again, we in education, we're so nice. And we don't like conflict to ask those questions up front. And we need to do that as we go through. And she said our session has ended. So thank you very much.